the observation deck of Crescendo Station, offered a view that most beings would call breathtaking. Stars scattered like diamonds across black velvet, nebulae swirling in colors that defied simple description. But Seraphine Vax barely noticed the beauty beyond the transparent alloy walls. Her attention was fixed on the data tablet in her slender, silver fingers, reviewing the personnel file that had just ruined her entire year. Dimitri Hale, human, male, age 34 standard years, ambassador for the Terran Coalition. The holographic image showed a man with dark hair, sharp eyes, and an expression that suggested he found something perpetually amusing about the universe. Seraphine felt her jaw tighten. This was the creature they expected her to mentor, to guide through 3 months of cultural integration with the Velari people. 3 months of dealing with human impulsiveness, human emotion, human disorder. She closed the tablet with more force than necessary. The soft chime of the door interrupted her brewing frustration. He was early. Of course he was early. Humans had no sense of proper temporal protocols. They rushed everywhere, crashing through life like meteors through atmosphere. The door slid open to reveal Dimitri Hale in person, and Seraphine discovered that holographic images did not capture the full reality of human presence. He was taller than she expected, his frame solid where Velari bodies were elegant and streamlined. He wore the formal diplomatic uniform of Earth, dark blue with silver accents, but somehow managed to make it look casual. His smile was immediate and warm, completely inappropriate for a first formal meeting. "Welcome to Crescendo Station, Ambassador Hale." Seraphine kept her voice measured and cool. "I am Research Director Seraphine Vax. I will be your primary liaison during your integration period. Please call me Dimitri." His voice carried an accent she could not quite place, musical in its cadence. "And thank you for agreeing to this assignment. I know the Velari Council had concerns about the exchange program. The Velari Council had more than concerns. They had held 7 sessions debating whether humanity was sufficiently evolved for deep cultural contact. Seraphine had argued passionately against the program, presenting centuries of data on human conflict, environmental destruction, and social instability. But the political currents had shifted. Humanity controlled resources the Velari needed, and diplomacy required sacrifice. Apparently, she was at sacrifice. I did not agree to this assignment. Seraphine gestured toward the corridor. I was instructed to fulfill it. There is a difference. Now, if you will follow me, we should begin your orientation immediately. You have much to learn, and little time to learn it. Dimitri's smile never wavered, but something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or amusement. Seraphine could not tell which possibility annoyed her more. They walked through the station's central ring, where species from a dozen worlds mingled in the carefully controlled environment. The Velari sections were marked by clean lines and soft bioluminescent lighting, everything designed for efficiency and calm. Your quarters are in Sector 7. Seraphine pulled up a holographic map that floated between them as they walked. I have programmed your environmental controls to match Terran standard parameters. You will find the gravity slightly lighter than Earth normal, but within human tolerance ranges. Your schedule begins at first cycle tomorrow. I expect punctuality. Of course. Dimitri studied the floating map with genuine interest. This station is remarkable. By the way, I read that it was grown rather than built. Is that true? Seraphine felt a small stirring of reluctant approval. At least he had done basic research. Yes, Velari engineering uses biocrystalline matrices. We cultivate our structures over decades, shaping them as they develop. It is more harmonious than your method of forcing metal and composite into unnatural configurations. She regretted the words immediately. The comment was unnecessarily critical, revealing her bias. Dimitri's eyebrow rose slightly, but his tone remained pleasant when he responded. Unnatural is an interesting word choice. Humans build the way that makes sense for our lifespans and resources. We adapt quickly because we must, but I would love to learn more about your methods. Perhaps we are not as different as you think. We are entirely different. Seraphine stopped at a junction where the corridor branched toward the residential sections. Velari civilization is 14,000 years old. We have learned patience, balance, and the value of careful planning. Humanity has existed as a spacefaring species for less than 2 centuries. You are children playing with tools you barely understand. Dimitri's smile finally faded. When he spoke again, his voice carried a new edge. Children who managed to develop faster than light travel independently. Children who survived 3 near-extinction events and rebuilt each time. Children who are apparently interesting enough that your ancient civilization wanted to establish formal diplomatic relations. So perhaps we are not quite as simple as you would prefer to believe. They stared at each other in the corridor, and Seraphine felt heat rise in her chest. Anger, yes, but something else too. Challenge. This human was not going to be the passive, overwhelmed visitor she had expected. He was going to push back, question everything, disrupt her carefully ordered world. Your quarters are through that arch, Seraphine pointed, without looking away from his gaze. I will collect you at first cycle. Do not be late. I am never late. Dimitri tilted his head slightly, studying her with those sharp human eyes. Thank you for your time, Research Director. I look forward to learning from you. Even if you would prefer, I was not here. He turned and walked toward his assigned quarters, leaving Seraphine alone in the corridor with her irritation and something uncomfortably close to curiosity. She had dealt with dozens of species during her career. She had negotiated with a crystalline moth who communicated through light patterns, mediated disputes between the gaseous WRYN and the aquatic Velari. She had never let personal feelings interfere with professional duty. But something about Dimitri Hale unsettled her in ways she could not quite define. His confidence, perhaps, or the way he had challenged her assumptions without raising his voice, or simply the unwelcome reminder that her prejudices were showing ugly and obvious. Seraphine made her way back to her own quarters, the day's events replaying in her mind. 3 months. She had to endure 3 months of this human's presence. Teach him about Velari culture, pretend that she believed in the value of this exchange. It seemed an impossible task. In her quarters, she stood before the window wall, watching the stars slowly wheel past as Crescendo Station maintained its orbit. Somewhere out there was Earth, humanity's cradle world, a planet that had nearly destroyed itself multiple times, yet somehow survived, a species that refused to accept limitations, that pushed forward regardless of consequences. Seraphine closed her eyes and took a long, slow breath. The Velari way was patience, control, harmony with natural rhythms. She would apply those principles here. She would guide Dimitri through his integration, fulfill her duty to the Council, and emerge from this experience with her convictions intact. The universe, as she would soon discover, had other plans entirely. The alarm started as a low hum that quickly escalated into a piercing wail. Seraphine was in the central research lab when the station's emergency systems activated, bathing everything in pulsing red light. Her tablet displayed the problem immediately. Sector 7. Life support failure. Containment protocols engaged. Sector 7. Dimitri's quarters. She was moving before conscious thought could intervene, her legs carrying her through corridors that suddenly seemed endless. Other Velari moved with practiced calm toward their emergency stations, but Seraphine felt something wild and uncontrolled rising in her chest. Fear. She had not felt genuine fear in decades. The security barrier was already in place when she reached Sector 7, a shimmering energy field that prevented access. Through the translucent barrier, she could see Dimitri standing in the corridor, his hand pressed against the field from the other side. His expression was calm, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his breath came slightly faster than normal. What happened? Her voice came out sharper than intended, masking the panic underneath that micrometeor breach in the outer hull. Dimitri's voice was steady through the communication system. Nothing dramatic. The station sealed this section automatically. Life support is stable for now, but the repair drones cannot access the damaged area until the debris field clears. Should be about 6 hours, 0.6 hours trapped in a sealed section with limited resources. Seraphine pulled up the environmental readings on her tablet. Oxygen levels were adequate, temperature stable, but the psychological impact of confinement could be severe for humans. They were not bred for patience like the Velari. I will monitor your status from here. She kept her voice professional, detached. If conditions deteriorate, We can initiate emergency extraction protocols. I will be fine. Dimitri smiled, that infuriating human smile that seemed to emerge regardless of circumstances. Besides, now you have 6 hours where you do not have to actively deal with me in person. Consider it a gift. Despite everything, Seraphine felt her lips twitch towards something that might have been a smile. That lasted approximately 3 minutes before her sense of duty overwhelmed her reluctance. She could not simply stand on the safe side of the barrier, while her assigned diplomat sat alone in a sealed section. It violated every principle of proper liaison protocol. Move away from the barrier. She input commands into the security panel. What are you doing? Dimitri stepped back as the energy field flickered. Fulfilling my responsibilities. The barrier dropped long enough for her to step through, then reformed behind her with a soft hum. If you are trapped in here, then as your liaison, I should be here as well. That is completely illogical. Dimitri stared at her with an expression she could not quite read. Now you are trapped too. Yes. Seraphine walked past him toward the common area at the center of the sealed section. It is entirely illogical. Welcome to the consequences of your presence in my life, Ambassador. She heard him laugh, a warm sound that echoed oddly in the empty corridor. When she glanced back, he was followed with that peculiar human stride, purposeful yet somehow relaxed. They settled into the common area, a space designed for social interaction with soft seating and adjustable lighting. Seraphine dimmed emergency lights to something less aggressive. The first hour passed in awkward silence. Seraphine reviewed reports on her tablet, while Dimitri examined the artistic installations on the walls, biosculptures that shifted slowly in response to ambient conditions. She found herself watching him more than her work, noticing the way he moved with unconscious grace, how his fingers traced the sculptures with genuine appreciation. These are beautiful. He spoke without turning around. The way the light moves through them, it is like watching thoughts take physical form. That is precisely the intention. Seraphine set down her tablet. Velari art is meant to reflect the inner processes of consciousness made visible. Each sculpture responds to the emotional resonance in the room. Right now it is showing what? Our mutual discomfort at being trapped together? Dimitri turned to face her, and his smile had softened into something more genuine. Perhaps. Or perhaps something more complex. Seraphine studied the nearest sculpture, watching pale blue light pulse through crystalline structures. Emotions are rarely simple, regardless of species. Dimitri moved to sit in a chair across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Can I ask you something? Why do you hate humans so much? I have read about Velari philosophy, your emphasis on harmony and patience. But what I sense from you is not philosophical disagreement. It feels personal. The question struck deeper than Seraphine expected. She could have deflected, maintained professional distance. Instead, she found herself answering with unusual honesty. 70 years ago, I was part of a joint research mission with human scientists. We were studying a collapsing star system, gathering data on gravitational anomalies. The humans were brilliant, but reckless. They pushed the safety parameters, insisted we could get closer, gather better readings. I argued against it. I presented calculations showing the danger. They accused me of being overcautious, of letting fear limit discovery. What happened? Dimitri's voice was soft, inviting her to continue. They were right about the readings. We gathered extraordinary data, but they were wrong about the safety margins. The stellar collapse accelerated beyond predictions. We lost 3 researchers in the evacuation, 2 Velari and 1 human, all because human ambition outweighed human caution. Seraphine met his eyes directly. So no, Ambassador, my opinion of your species is not based on abstract philosophy. It is based on bodies left floating in space because someone could not accept reasonable limitations. Dimitri was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight she had not heard before. I am sorry for your loss and for the pain it has caused you. You are right to be angry. That kind of recklessness is inexcusable. Seraphine had expected defensiveness, justifications about risk being necessary for progress. The simple acknowledgement disarmed her completely. But Dimitri continued, I hope you can also see that those humans do not represent all of us. Just as I assume you would not want your entire species judged by the actions of your most foolish members. We make mistakes, yes. We push too hard sometimes. But we also learn. We adapt. That is our strength and our weakness. The sculpture between them shifted, colors deepening to violet and gold. Seraphine realized she was seeing Dimitri clearly for perhaps the first time, not as a representative of a species she despised, but as an individual with his own complexities and depths. Tell me about Earth. She surprised herself with the request. Not the political structures or economic systems. Tell me what it is like to stand on your world. That Dimitri's entire expression transformed. He spoke about oceans that covered most of the planet, waves that crashed against shores in rhythms as old as time itself. He described forests where light filtered through leaves in patterns of green and gold, mountains that pierced clouds, deserts that stretched beyond horizons. His words painted pictures of a world both beautiful and brutal, where life fought constantly to survive and somehow found ways to thrive. Seraphine listened, and somewhere in his descriptions, she felt something shift inside her. A wall she had maintained for 70 years, built from grief and anger, developed its first crack. Hours passed without notice. They talked about art and music, about the nature of consciousness, about whether the universe cared if anything existed within it. Dimitri challenged her assumptions but never dismissed them. He listened when she spoke about Velari philosophy with genuine curiosity rather than polite tolerance. When the barrier finally deactivated, signaling the sector was safe again, Seraphine felt an unexpected disappointment. The 6 hours had passed faster than she wanted to admit. They stood together in the corridor as other station personnel moved past, returning to normal operations. Dimitri looked at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken in ways that had nothing to do with fear or anger. "Thank you for staying." He said it simply, without dramatics. It meant something. You meant something. Seraphine should have deflected with professional courtesy. Instead, she found herself saying, "Tomorrow, if you are interested, I could show you the bio gardens. They're not open to most visitors, but I have access. I would like that very much." Dimitri's smile was different now, warmer and somehow more intimate. As she walked back to her quarters, Seraphine realized with creeping awareness that something fundamental had changed. She had entered that sealed section seeing Dimitri as an obligation, an unwanted assignment from a species she had every reason to distrust. She was leaving it seeing him as something far more dangerous. She was beginning to see him as someone who mattered. The bio gardens became their sanctuary over the following weeks. Seraphine found reasons to bring Dimitri there almost daily, ostensibly as part of his cultural education. In reality, she craved his presence in ways that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. They walked among plants that glowed with bioluminescence, creating constellations on a ground that mirrored the stars beyond the station walls. What they had was impossible. Seraphine knew this with the rational part of her mind that had guided her through 2 centuries of life. Velari did not engage in casual romance. Their bonding rituals were complex, involving family negotiations and compatibility assessments that took years to complete. And certainly, they did not bond with humans, whose lifespans were barely long enough to learn proper meditation techniques. Yet here she was, sitting beside Dimitri on a stone bench surrounded by flowering vines, her hand somehow finding its way into his. His fingers were warmer than hers, his pulse quicker. Everything about him was accelerated, intense, burning bright like a star that would flare and fade while she continued on for centuries. "I received a message from the Velari Council today." Seraphine kept her voice steady despite the turmoil beneath. "They are pleased with the progress of the exchange program. They want to extend your stay and expand the initiative. More humans coming to Velari stations. More integration. That is good news." Dimitri's thumb traced small circles on her palm. "Is it not? It is what the council wants. What I argued against for years." Seraphine pulled her hand away, standing to pace among the gardens. "And now I find myself in the absurd position of having to admit I was wrong. You are not what I expected. Dimitri Hale, you have complicated everything." "Good." He stood as well, closing the distance between them. "You needed complicating. You were so certain about humans, about me, before you even met me. You had everything sorted into neat categories: safe and dangerous, logical and chaotic, Velari and other, because those categories kept me safe. Seraphine turned to face him, and she could feel emotions rising that she had suppressed for decades. After the accident, after losing my colleagues, I built walls. I decided that if I could control everything, predict everything, trust only what was proven safe over centuries, then I would never feel that pain again. And then you arrive with your human chaos and your impossible optimism, and somehow you made me feel things I swore I would never feel again. What do you feel? Dimitri asked, and his voice was gentle but insistent. Everything. Too much. Seraphine felt the words spilling out beyond her control. I feel alive in ways I have not experienced in 70 years. I look forward to each day because I know I will see you. I find myself thinking in human time frames, measuring moments instead of years. You have infected me with your brief, burning way of experiencing existence, and I do not know if I can return to the slow, patient life I had before. Then do not return. Dimitri reached out, cupping her face with both hands. Stay here. Stay in this moment with me. I know our time is limited. I know that by your standards, I will be gone in an eye blink. But does that make this less real? Does my shorter lifespan mean what we have matters less? It means it will hurt more when you are gone. Seraphine felt moisture gathering in her eyes, tears that Velari rarely shed. It means I will have centuries to remember you and nothing to fill the space you leave behind. Or it means you will have centuries of beautiful memories instead of centuries of safe emptiness. Dimitri leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers. I am not asking you to abandon who you are. I am asking you to let yourself be more than just safe. The garden seemed to hold its breath around them. Seraphine stood at a precipice she had never expected to face. Behind her lay the comfortable certainty of her previous life, the careful walls she had constructed, the slow and measured existence of proper Velari philosophy. Before her lay something terrifying and beautiful, a connection that defied logic, but felt more real than anything she had known. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not a Velari bonding ritual, no careful exchange of bioelectric resonance. It was human and messy and perfect. His lips were warm, his arms strong as they wrapped around her. She felt his heartbeat against her chest, that rapid human rhythm that counted out seconds and minutes with urgent insistence. Live now, it seemed to say, this moment matters. This moment is everything. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder than necessary, Seraphine made her decision. The consequences would be enormous. The council would be scandalized. Her family would question her stability. But standing in Dimitri's arms, surrounded by glowing flowers in a garden built between stars, she discovered that she no longer cared about the careful approval of others. I want this. She said it clearly, letting the words carry full weight. I want you, for however long we have, in whatever form that takes. I am choosing this chaos over safety. I am choosing you. Dimitri's smile could have lit the entire station. Then we face whatever comes together. The announcement created exactly the scandal Seraphine anticipated. The Velari Council called emergency sessions. Her research privileges were questioned. Colleagues who had respected her for decades now looked at her with pity or disgust. The human diplomatic corps was equally troubled, worried about precedents and political complications. But they also became symbols of something larger than themselves. Other unlikely pairs began to emerge across the galaxy. A human engineer and a Telcorian merchant. A Velari artist and a human musician. The barriers between species, so carefully maintained, began to crack under the weight of individual connections that refused to observe proper boundaries. 6 months after that first meeting, Seraphine and Dimitri stood before representatives of both governments, formalizing a bond that satisfied neither species completely, but somehow worked perfectly for them. It was not marriage by human standards or proper bonding by Velari tradition. It was something new, something that belonged only to them. The ceremony took place in the bio gardens, of course. Representatives from a dozen species attended, some supportive, others skeptical. Seraphine wore traditional Velari ceremonial robes modified to accommodate human aesthetic preferences. Dimitri wore formal Earth attire with Velari symbols woven into the fabric. They were neither one thing nor the other, but something that could only exist in the space between worlds. When the formalities concluded and the guests departed, they remained in the garden as stars wheeled overhead. Seraphine leaned against Dimitri, feeling his warmth, his presence, the precious finite nature of every moment they shared. "I still do not understand how this happened," she spoke softly. "6 months ago, I would have done anything to avoid this assignment. Now I cannot imagine existence without you in it. That is the thing about the future." Dimitri kissed the top of her head. "It is full of surprises. You spent so long trying to calculate and control it that you forgot futures worth living are usually the ones we never see coming." Seraphine smiled, a gesture that came more easily now. "Very wise for a species you once called children. We contain multitudes." As someone very human once wrote, Dimitri pulled her closer. "And now you are stuck with all of it. The chaos, the emotion, the reckless optimism. Think you can handle it? For the next 70 or 80 years at least." The words carried bittersweet weight, acknowledging the truth they both knew. Dimitri would age while she remained essentially unchanged. Their time was limited in ways that hurt to consider. "Then we make every single one count." Dimitri turned her to face him, his expression serious now. "No wasted moments. No holding back, because we are afraid of the ending. We live fully right up until we cannot anymore. Deal?" Seraphine kissed him instead of answering, pouring everything into that moment. All her fear and hope and desperate love for this impossible human who had crashed into her carefully ordered life and made it infinitely more complicated and infinitely more worth living. Above them, the stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the dramas of the beings below. But for Seraphine and Dimitri, standing together in their garden between worlds, the universe had contracted to just this: two hearts beating in different rhythms that somehow created perfect harmony. She had rejected humans all her life until one moment changed everything. Now she could not imagine existence without embracing all the beautiful chaos they brought. And that, she realized, was not weakness. It was the bravest thing she had ever done.